So let me give you a heads up. First of
Sure.
all, I'm in my backyard, and the landscaper's around, so you might hear some leaf blowers. If
Okay.
it gets bad, I'll go back inside. Second of all, I live underneath a flight pattern, so you might hear a jet flying overhead.
No
And
problem.
lastly, my grandson, he's coming back from the dentist, got some fillings done
Oh
to
boy.
pick up his bicycle. He's a little traumatized, so we might have to deal with some of that drama.
No problem.
All right,
I
so
have 3 kids here today too, so.
okay. So let me take a sip of coffee and we can begin here.
Sure.
All right, everybody. So let me give you the background here. So a couple of years ago, started Vikings versus Samurai, and I was looking for new illustrators. And Dave, you were one of the first people I came across, and I believe it was one of your artwork that you did for the Mushikera comic book that you worked on, which we'll talk about in a second. And I was really blown away. I'm like, oh, I love this stuff. This would be perfect. And I forget the reasons why, but it didn't work out. Maybe you had other obligations, or I don't know what it is. I ended up working with Bridegroom from Turkey, and that worked out wonderfully. But finally, your schedule opened up, and you could work on an issue, and you did a bang-up job. It just came out a week ago. It was the Bridegroom and the She-Bear. So let's start there, and then we'll backtrack to how we developed a working relationship and how you got into comic books. So my question is this: when I wrote that comic book, usually when I'm done writing a script, I'm elated. I feel fantastic. And this one, it made me want to cry. I was just heartbroken. And then I looked at it, I'm like, wow, this issue's dealing with bestiality and cannibalism and all sorts of other weird stuff. So what did you make of the script, and what was it like to illustrate it?
Well, I mean, for starters, it definitely wasn't something that is typical to come across the desk. Having just finished 2 samurai stories, it was kind of interesting just to have something a little outside the scope of straight up samurai. It was definitely different, but it was cool because it's comics, everything kind of goes, and it was done tastefully. It wasn't like it was something that was done, just kind of for spite. Like there was kind of more of a purpose to the story, more of a fable kind of classic tale, so to speak, of like lore, which I thought was kind of cool. But immediately just reading it, I was like, I can see this scene in my head. I can see this scene in my head. I can't wait to draw this scene. I can see this. And I mean, I got to draw bears, so you have to be excited about that,
And bears having sex with humans.
Well, tastefully.
So that's another question I want to ask you about. I don't do this stuff intentionally. I just write it, and then afterwards I look at it. I'm like, ooh, that came out of my head. So
Yeah.
Tasteful is fine, but was there any limit that you didn't want to cross?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. Honestly, when I was looking at these, I'm like, I don't know if should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? Is this, I guess if I do this in a way that isn't like, pornography or something like that, I think this is going to be okay. But I just kind of chalked it up to, you know what? There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on in comics, and this is kind of, telling a story. I mean, you have like the Iliad and the Odyssey and all the stuff that goes on in those too. You know what I mean? So I just feel like it's, just kind of fables, passed down things. And I'm sure it's not the first instance in oral history that a man and some type of animal haven't been married and this and that. And,
Yeah, I was drawing upon Greek mythology, Norse
right,
mythology,
exactly.
Grimm's fairy tale, and all that stuff is very bloody and gruesome and very grimdark. So I got my field notes notebook here for my questions. So one thing I noticed right away, and this will be obvious to everyone who read the issue and is now seeing your beautiful face, but quite clearly you are Otter the Viking in the tale. So how did that come about?
I mean, I use a lot of photo reference for my art. And so far, I've been a samurai. I've been just kind of crowd people. I've been a Viking. I've been lots of different things. When you don't have access to other individuals, you just kind of make up. You shoot yourself on the spot. And it was like, wow, you know what? There's actually a character that I could kind of believably be the reference for. So I just took the hair down, kind of mangled up the beard a little bit, and took some photos. So, but I will say the one initially. That was the other thing too, is I had drawn one of the pages from the perspective of the Viking as opposed to the samurai who it should have been. But I will say that the abs that I drew on Otter on that panel were not actually photo reference. I had to, take some liberties with those. So.
I just assumed you had a chiseled physique. So before we move on to other things, I want to do lessons learned because I am a newbie at this. I've only written
Sure.
a year's worth of comic book scripts. Going forward, what could I have done differently? I mean, for example, like when I wrote this story out, I had to actually do it on note cards because I had to jump back from what was happening in the story, what the kids were perceiving, because the kids are Japanese, so they're seeing it through their cultural lens,
Right.
and the story that author's trying to impart. And in order to keep track of it, I had to do it on note cards. And I know that might have not translated so well in the script. So that's one example. So going forward, lessons learned. What did you learn from yourself on how to illustrate yet another comic book? And what could I have done differently to make your job easier?
Well, for me, lessons learned is, read and read again, just to avoid kind of making mistakes. But no, I mean, I think that if anything, there were different parts of the story that was like, how am I going to approach this? This is different than what I normally do. I don't want to say uncomfortable in the sense of the material, but just in the sense of so many angles, some of the call outs. But if you only do things that you're comfortable with, you're never really going to grow. And I'm constantly on a quest to try to get where I want to be in my head, page wise.
Mm-hmm.
So every page that I do, I kind of look at it as like almost like a tank. And every page that I draw is a drop of water in the tank. And I want to fill up my tank to, once the tank is full, I'm going to be where I want to be at that point. So for me, it's just, do all the page work that you can do, approach it the best way that you can, and just try to do the best with what you're able to do with it. So, I mean, as an artist, I'm going to look at every single page that I do, and I should have done this different. I should have done that different. So that's my own kind of thing, having more confidence in my work. But it was a fun time. And as far as working with you, it was an absolute pleasure. I really don't think I can think of anything that I would tell you to do differently.
All right. Well, cool.
It was pretty cut and dry. Here's the script. Here's this. This is coordinated. Here's the deadline. You were easy to work with. If I had a suggestion on a panel, you were like, yeah, sure, let's do it. It was a fun time for sure.
Yeah, the way I work is I have a specific vision, but I'm a writer, and you're an illustrator, and you will think of ways to tell a story
Yes.
that will not occur to me. So I'm just going to put my trust in your capable hands. Speaking of capable hands, you introduced me to colorist Mark Dale and
Yes.
letterer
Rob.
Rob Jones. And Mark
Yep.
Dale, actually, I went to my local comic book shop, and there was a comic book called now I can't remember. The Survivant, I think is what it was called, that he colored.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, who did the coloring? I'm like, oh, Mark Dale. What do
It's a
you
pretty
know?
cool thing when you can pick out a book on the wall that's, someone that you just had do your work as well. So
Yeah, it
for
was
sure.
crazy. So how did you get to know these two gentlemen?
So I met Rob. I think we actually met Rob doing Mushikera through a Facebook post. I don't remember what it was. I think the writer of Mushikera, Alex, had found or put out an ad or responded to something on a Facebook group that a letterist was looking for work. So we found Rob that way. And I mean, Rob's lettered everything that I've done so far, and hopefully will continue to letter everything that I do. He's fantastic. And this is my first time working with Mark. Mark was referred by Rob. Well, just kind of one of those, hey, Rob, do you know any colorists? Sure. Use Mark. Talked to Mark a couple times. He was great. I've referred Mark to some other projects as well. Just from top to bottom, I mean, it was an absolute pleasure to work with Rob and Mark. They're both like consummate professionals, and I couldn't say no good things about them.
Agreed. I can't wait to work with them in the future. And one of the things I like about Rob is, now, being someone who comes from comic books, I appreciate lettering more than the
Yes.
average person. But now that I'm actually doing it, I really, really value it. And he was able to really convey the dialogue and not have the word balloons feel
Yeah.
cramped. And Mark really brought the story to life with his colors. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for those introductions.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, Rob does things in a very nuanced way where nothing is lost on what he's doing with letters. And I think Mark just is not afraid to do different things and try new things, and it works. Just really cool. I never would have imagined the palette that he used and how he colored. And when I saw it, I was just like, wow, this is insane. This is so cool.
Yeah, and it really
So,
matched your illustration style. So
yes.
let's move on to you. Let's get to know you. Now, first of all, you come from a Viking heritage, as I understand, and you've drawn a lot of samurai. So let's touch
Yes.
base on that.
Yeah, so I'm actually third generation Swedish and Norwegian. I had an uncle named Bror, so I mean we're not that far removed from the motherland, I guess. Not a lot of the family unfortunately is passed, and we don't have contact with just because of that reason. So it's been a lot of ancestry.com trying to figure out who things are and where they're from. But maybe one day we'll get over there. But yeah, samurai, I've always loved samurai stuff. My main thing is horror, you know, Wolfman. That's kind of my thing. I was set up at a show, and there was a gentleman across from me, Alex. Got to talk to him, got to meet him. Super nice guy. It's like, hey man, I had a lot of Toshiro Mifune warm ups that I did that I had as 9 by 12 pieces on my rack at the show. It's like, oh, you like samurai stuff? Yeah, man. Like I love all the old school, Seven Samurai, like all the old classic movies. It's like we should do a samurai book together. I'd love to. So that's how it went. Did issue 1, and then did issue 2. There's an issue 3, I think, at some point in the future. So it's nice. I mean, I think at one point between 2 issues of Mushikera and then Viking versus Samurai, I've drawn like 48 consecutive pages of Japanese people and samurai related stuff. So it's pretty cool.
So what's the elevator pitch for Mushikera? If you had to break it down into like 2 sentences, what would you say Mushikera is?
I guess it's a battle of good and evil, taking the high road when you know that you're not going to be looked at the same.
All right. So you've drawn a lot of samurai.
Yes.
And I've drawn a lot of Vikings. And I've been checking out your Instagram feed.
Yes.
You're involved in another project. So is it too early
Yes.
to say what this project is? Do you want to hype it up a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, this project, it's a little too early to announce just yet, but the summary of that is it's body horror, it's sci-fi, it's thriller, it's a lot of cool stuff. I'm definitely doing things that I've never done before, art-wise, taking some chances. We're doing a lot of things that you probably haven't seen in comics before, which has been hard to kind of wrap my head around. But I'm having a good time, learning some new things, and been talking to a couple artists that I really admire, and getting some tips and tricks and the way that they're doing things, and it's made my workflow a lot better in the last couple of weeks. So I'm excited to do the next few things, knowing what I know and what I'm working with now. So,
all right, for the aspiring illustrators out there, what's one tip or trick that you've picked up in working on this project?
So this project, or just projects in general?
The project you're working on right now.
The project I'm working on right now. Well, for example, I've definitely been more of a traditional person. In comics, I've decided to do digitally just for speed.
Mm-hmm.
So working in different layers and just not being afraid to experiment. I made the mistake of saying, this artist I like, they use this tool. So this is a tool that I have to use too, because I want to kind of do something similar to what they do. And then you realize, you join a live and you talk to them, and you're like, they don't even use this tool anymore. They're using this tool. And you're like, oh my God, why did I pigeonhole myself for so long doing what I thought that they would do, rather than just trying to figure out like what my voice is. So, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. You like certain bands, you like singing their songs, but you got to sing them in your voice. You know what I mean? So that's trying to go down that path a little bit more.
Right on. All right. So before we wrap this up and bring it on home, if people want to learn more about you, of course, they can follow you here on Instagram. But where can they go on? Where else can they go online in social media or visit your website?
Yeah, my website, I go by DF3Inc. So df3inc.com, and all of my handles. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Bluesky, I'm on Threads, just DF3Inc.
Yeah, check out Dave's stuff. Check out Mark Dale's stuff. Check out Rob Jones. If you want to hire them on for your own projects, let us know. We'll turn you on to them, or Dave for that matter, because Dave, you cranked 40 pages of artwork last year? Is that right?
Last year I did about 40 pages approximately, I figured out. So, which I was kind of proud of, just full-time dad, all the other stuff that I got going on. So
let's see if we can do another 40 this year. Before I go, in a couple hours, I'm going to be doing a role-playing game with Ian Sharp. It's called Vikings. No, it's Valkyries and Vikings. And I'm going to be playing a sea pirate, I believe.
Nice.
So, cool. I'll drop that later on. Actually, Ian will drop it. I'll share it. You can always check me out at VikingsVersusSamurai.com. That's Vikings, I don't know how to do S, Samurai.com, VikingsVSSamurai.com. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Mastodon. You can find me on Threads. Not really on X anymore. Always the same.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. So, Dave, thanks so much for joining me, and we'll be working on future projects.
It was a pleasure. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Ciao.